Hi, my name is Maika the Nurse, and today we're going to be going over, is Tylenol use linked with autism? Now, I understand this is a polarizing topic, so if you're going to leave a comment, please be respectful. Other than that, let's get into it. Now, first off, I want to draw attention to the fact that I said link. I didn't say cause, I said link, and so did the administration. No one actually said that Tylenol causes autism. I just wanted to get that out of the way. What RFK did say is that we have enough evidence to support that we do see an association between Tylenol use and an increased risk for autism. Now, RFK says that we specifically don't have enough evidence to establish a causal relationship. But what he did say is that there is a study to establish that there is a dose-dependent relationship between prenatal Tylenol use and neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD and autism. Why even is there a max dose? That's because Tylenol actually creates a byproduct when it's broken down called NAPQI. For the sake of this video, we're going to call it NAPQI. So NAPQI is a toxic byproduct of Tylenol metabolism that causes harm by depleting glutathione. Also leads to things like oxidative stress and can actually injure the liver. So what percentage of Tylenol is broken down into NAPQI? Well, according to studies from the NIH, anywhere from 5 to 10% of Tylenol is broken down into the harmful substance NAPQI, which is why we have a daily max dose. Your body can only tolerate so much NAPQI before all of your glutathione is depleted. NAPQI deletes glutathione. What is glutathione? Glutathione is your body's master antioxidant. In layman's terms, glutathione protects you from toxins that enter the body. When glutathione finds a toxin in the body, it binds to it and escorts it out through the kidneys by urination. And glutathione is primarily made in the liver. So we always have a set amount throughout the body and in all of our cells. However, when something like NAPQI enters the body, aka 5 to 10% of any Tylenol you take, glutathione will go ahead and bind to that NAPQI and escort it out through the kidneys. Your NAPQI levels become depleted because they have to bind to the NAPQI and take them out through the kidneys, like all the other toxins. So when you start to go over the recommended max dose, you deplete so much of your glutathione that the NAPQI can start to injure the liver. So when you take more than the recommended maximum dose, you can deplete your glutathione levels so low that the NAPQI can start to cause harm to your liver and cause cell death. Now, while there's some weak evidence that shows that Tylenol could be a direct contributor to how a baby can develop neurodevelopmental symptoms while in the womb, RFK has officially announced that we're going to finally be doing the studies of all environmental toxins, which includes all of the aluminum that is currently in the childhood vaccines that are recommended by the CDC. Now, what percentage of the vaccines contain aluminum? Well, by the time a child turns 5, about 50% of them do. Why does aluminum in the vaccines even matter? Well, the answer is that aluminum is neurotoxic. Aluminum can make its way into your brain. It can make its way into any nerves. Nerves contain sulfur. So when aluminum is injected into the body, it'll actually bind to anything that contains sulfur in it, which are, you guessed it, nerves. All throughout your nervous system, your nerves contain sulfur. And if you look up, does aluminum bind to sulfur? It does. So you can see here that aluminum increases oxidative stress in the neurons, while simultaneously reducing the body's antioxidant capacity. Aluminum binding can interfere with synthesis and function of glutathione, making neurons more vulnerable to oxidative damage and neurodegeneration. So let's put it all together. When you take Tylenol, it turns into the harmful substance NAPQI. And in order to get rid of the NAPQI, glutathione has to bind with NAPQI and be urinated out. And if there is too much NAPQI, it can start to damage your liver. Now, when you add aluminum to the equation, any Tylenol will produce NAPQI, and any NAPQI will deplete glutathione. Glutathione is also in charge of getting rid of the aluminum. Therefore, if you have depleted levels of glutathione, what is there to protect you against the aluminum? Aluminum, which becomes neurotoxic. So if we look over the neurotoxic effects of what aluminum actually does, and this does say high aluminum exposure. However, isn't it all relative? Because if you're taking Tylenol, which is depleting your glutathione levels, all of a sudden your threshold for what is high gets changed. Symptoms can include impaired cognitive function, memory loss, confusion, coordination issues, motor neuron degeneration. That means your ability to move. Now, I asked Google to make a list that captures symptoms that autism and aluminum toxicity have in common. And what do you know? Both conditions can cause irritability, altered moods, memory loss, cognitive deficits, dementia-like symptoms, impaired coordination, poor motor movement, ataxia, which is the loss of control of bodily movements, stuttering, speech disturbances, seizures, convulsions, anxiety, mood disorders. It can even cause gastro issues, chronic inflammation. Now, isn't that strange? Both aluminum toxicity and autism symptoms are basically the same. aluminum. But aluminum toxicity only happens when you have too high of aluminum levels and there's a safe, tolerable level of aluminum, right? That's what the past administrations have said. However, RFK fights for a different approach, which is to study the aluminum, which we know can be very neurotoxic. And some people ask a good question. Why is aluminum in the vaccines at all? Aluminum is what we call an adjuvant in the vaccines. Now, an adjuvant is a substance added to a vaccine to enhance its immune response, to which I say, how does it enhance the immune response? So what you will find about how the aluminum interacts with your cells is that you have these little guys called macrophages that try to engulf the aluminum. However, the aluminum disrupts the cell's internal structures, including the lysosome, and causes cellular stress. It actually ruptures what tries to eat it, causing an inflammatory response. And then so what actually causes your fever is a spike of cytokines and interleukin 18, which makes its way to your brain, which causes a fever. And RFK has been saying for years that we know that sometimes when people get vaccines, they take Tylenol to counter the fever that we know the patient is going to have. What the past administrations didn't consider is that when you're taking Tylenol, it depletes your glutathione levels. And your glutathione levels are what your defense is against the aluminum. To me, I feel like that makes us understand why there's evidence that there is a link between Tylenol and autism. Maybe Tylenol doesn't cause autism. Maybe it sets you up to be vulnerable to aluminum exposure. And if you have too high of aluminum levels in the body, aluminum can wreak havoc all over the body, causing symptoms of anemia, dementia. It attacks your kidneys. It can cause liver disease. It can attack your pancreas, lung disease. Therefore, it is my opinion that we should be looking into aluminum toxicity the way that RFK is now looking into it. This is not a substitute for medical advice. That is between you and your doctor. And let's remember what the actual recommendation was is that if you have a high enough fever to where it'll affect the life of the baby, then you should take the smallest amount of Tylenol for the shortest duration of time. Because one of the studies that they put forward was 996 mothers had the plasma of the placenta cords tested for Tylenol. All of them had Tylenol use. They divided them up into 3 categories. The medium use category had 1 to 2 times the amount of neurodevelopmental symptoms of the first one. And the third group had 3 to 4 times the amount of neuro symptoms than in the first group. And they all took Tylenol. And the current FDA commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, also brings up that fevers are a natural mechanism for your body to fight viruses and bacteria. Your body will purposefully raise the temperature because some of those bacteria and viruses cannot survive in that level of heat. And he goes on to explain that some studies have shown that if you try to shorten the duration of a fever, it can actually prolong your sickness, and vice versa. Now, if you enjoyed the video and you learned something new, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're brand new and you want to find your way back, double check, make sure to subscribe with notifications on. My name is Maika the Nurse. Much love, y'all. See you in the next one.